The world is closing in. Did you ever think that we could be so close, like brothers? The future's in the air, can feel it everywhere, blowing with the wind of change. Take me in the magic of the moment on a glory night where the children of tomorrow dream away in the wind of change. What an intro, Scorpions, don't you know? Now, the Scorpions don't have much to do with a hurricane, but I found the song fitting all the same. After all, it talks about the winds of change. So, I'm going to share with you the dichotomy of why my hair looks like it's gone with the wind, while I also have a sloth climbing up a Christmas tree. It all has to do with this book by John Grisham, Camino Winds. Now, I didn't know prior to reading this book that this book is actually number 2 in a series. I did not feel that this had any impact whatsoever on my reading of this book. Of course, I don't know what I'm missing. What I do know is that, unfortunately, this John Grisham book for me wasn't that well done. Okay. Before I get too much hate, the writing itself is superb. It has more to do with the pace of this book. It talks about a hurricane. It's a mystery and a crime unfurling within the winds of this hurricane that's changing part of Florida forever, just like recent events. Anyway, let me read the back to you, and then we'll go from there. Just as Bruce Cable's Bay Books is preparing for the return of best-selling author Mercer Mann, Hurricane Leo veers from its predicted course and heads straight for Camino Island. Florida's governor orders a mandatory evacuation, and most residents board up their houses and flee to the mainland, but Bruce decides to stay and ride out the storm. The hurricane is devastating. Homes and condos are leveled, hotels and storefronts ruined, streets flooded, and a dozen people lose their lives. One of the apparent victims is Nelson Kerr, a friend of Bruce's and an author of thrillers, but the nature of Nelson's injuries suggests that the storm wasn't the cause of his death. He has suffered several suspicious blows to the head. Who would want Nelson dead? The police are overwhelmed in the aftermath of the storm and ill-equipped to handle the case. Bruce begins to wonder if the shady characters in Nelson's novels might be more real than fictional, and somewhere on Nelson's computer is the manuscript of his new book. Could the key to the case be right there in black and white? As Bruce starts to investigate, what he discovers between the lines is more shocking than any of Nelson's plot twists, and far more dangerous. Now, I've actually been a fan of most of John Grisham's books from the past. I mean, who could forget The Firm or The Pelican Brief, especially after they are brought to life in the movies, with such stars as Julia Roberts and Tom Cruise. No brainer, they were blockbusters, and so were John Grisham's books that came first. I haven't read a John Grisham novel in many years, perhaps decades. And so I just recently found Camino Winds in one of those free boxes where I've had many adventures this past summer. And I can understand now why Camino Winds was given away for free. You start the book where there's a hurricane a-coming, and then you find yourself in the middle of the hurricane itself with people that are riding out the storm. And yet, the whole first half of this book seems to move along at that pace of a sloth, despite the situation at hand where the wind is blowing everything away. As I mentioned before, this book is slow. It doesn't pick up its pace until about halfway through or even a little more. This is a book I actually sat down and I didn't touch it for a week or two. I let days go by. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish it. But I'm the type of person I do like to finish what I start, even if it takes me quite a while to get there. I have a really hard time not finishing a book I begin to read. So I did finish Camino Winds. It just took me a while. I'm glad I did stick with it. Halfway through and towards the end, the book finally picked up its pace. Then it became a page turner, and I didn't want to put it down. So the second half of the book was well worth the wait. But because of that wait, I actually only give this John Grisham book a 2-star rating. Normally, I reserve 2 stars for books that are highly predictable. Sad and surprising for me, to myself, to give a John Grisham novel a 2-star rating. But here we are. And I think in part it's because there's a lot of booze, there's a lot of shady business deals, there's a lot of things that are not on the up and up. So much to work with in this novel that I'm just shocked that it was so slow. Then, of course, it does dive even further into the underbelly of society that we just pretend doesn't exist, even though we know it's real. That of snipers hired to kill. A world where the rich people want to retain their wealth, and so they'll do just about anything to keep the money coming in, including contract killings of people that maybe they just don't think are serving them in life, or maybe they think they're a squeaky wheel and are going to get them in trouble later on, where their house of cards is all going to fall down. This book delves into nursing homes and the abuse of the elderly with a drug from China that wasn't FDA approved in America, a drug that was then used anyway. So it's kind of like being smuggled in and being used illegally to keep dementia patients alive for longer than they would be, bedridden, barely present, where they are kept alive in this in-between place of life and death, where there is no communication between them or their caregivers or family members. It's kind of torturous to let someone linger. It's inhumane in the way that you would administer a drug to prolong a life that, had the life been left alone, they would have already expired. And I don't know about you, but I think I'd rather go naturally than to be held in a vegetative, comatose state. Part of this book is, that whole adage of, oh, what tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive. And then, of course, there's the underlying theme of greed. And the only good twist to all of this book, the part of the book that has intrigue, is the fact that it all comes about and comes to light through a novelist, through a writer that's creating a novel that is a thriller but based on fact. There's a whistleblower that stepped forward and trusted this author to share her story, to share the story about all of this underlying illegal drug activity, to help bring the house of cards down, where this whistleblower's husband was the point of origin. And somehow the novelist's book was leaked. Somehow somebody found out about it. Somehow somebody thought, ooh, this is ringing a little too close to the truth, and so we need to take him out. The hurricane produces the perfect opportunity for these contract killers to get their dirty deeds done, in hopes that by killing someone during the middle of a hurricane, it would look like, oh, the blows to the head were like limbs of trees falling, or picket fences being picked up and pushed into this individual outdoors, or whatever the case may be. They thought they could cover their tracks, as it were, because they would have all been washed away. However, enough was left behind that not the police, but a combination of the FBI and the author's friends were able to use their imaginations enough to track down what really happened, to hire private detectives, people who were on the opposite side of bad, but still willing to do things underhanded to get what they needed to prove their case. And so there's a lot that happens toward the middle end of the book that, because there's so many layers to it, so many moving pieces, that it becomes intriguing. And the one valid point to it all is that writers do have power. Writers do have the power to expose darkness. Journalists have been killed throughout the centuries for truth telling, for exposing, for doing their best with their words to bring down the darkness. And so, in that way, this book was entirely plausible, as well as drugs coming in illegally from other countries and doing more harm than good for the profit of themselves and others. That's also extremely relevant and could be happening. It really comes down to this being a personal choice, a personal opinion, that because the book was just so laborious, because it was so slow, because of the boozing and the aspects that just were not to my taste, the crudeness of some of it, that just causes me to give this book a 2-star. The book just simply wasn't for me, and because it didn't hold my attention until the end, I can't seem to find my way to a higher rating other than a 2. Prove me wrong. Read this book yourself and let me know in the comments. Do you agree with my rating, or would you rate it higher? I know a 2 is a little harsh. All right, friends. As always, thank you so much for being here. Please like this video. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to this channel and ring the notification bell to follow along. Let's journey together. Thank you for being here. Until next time.